Praise Jesus, people of God. Today is Thursday, the 7th day of December 2023. On this day, we choose to remember and celebrate St. Ambrose, who is one of the doctors of the church. So this is going to be in two folds. The first part is going to be the general overview of the life of St. Ambrose, him as the Bishop of Milan and his daily life. In the second part, we're going to look at St. Ambrose and the Arians. We are also going to touch on the last days of St. Ambrose. And of course, ultimately, we will look at his writings. So please, if you are viewing this, be ready to also view the second part, so you get the whole story about our beloved St. Ambrose. So St. Ambrose was the Bishop of Milan from 374 to 397. He was born around 340 at Arles or Lyons. He died on 4th April 397. He was one of the most illustrious fathers and doctors of the church, and fitly chosen, together with St. Augustine, St. John Chrysostom, and St. Athanasius, to uphold the venerable chair of the Prince of the Apostles in the tribune of St. Peter's at Rome. The materials for a biography of the saint are chiefly to be found scattered through his writings, since the life written after his death by his secretary Paulinus at the suggestion of St. Augustine is extremely disappointing. Ambrose was descended from an ancient Roman family, which at an early period had embraced Christianity and numbered among its scions both Christian martyrs and high officials of the state. At the time of his birth, his father, likewise named Ambrosius, was prefect of Gallia and as such ruled the present territories of France, Britain and Spain, together with Tingitana in Africa. It was one of the four great prefectures of the empire and the highest office that could be held by a subject. Trier, Arles, and Lyons, the three principal cities of the province, contend for the honor of having given birth to the saint. He was the youngest of three children, being preceded by a sister Marcellina, who became a nun, and a brother Satyrus, who, upon the unexpected appointment of Ambrose to the episcopate, resigned a prefecture in order to live with him and relieve him from temporal cares. About the year 354, Ambrosius the father died, whereupon the family moved to Rome. The saintly and accomplished widow was greatly assisted in the religious training of her two sons by the example and admonitions of her daughter Marcellina, who was about 10 years older than Ambrose. Marcellina had already received the virginal veil from the hands of Liberius and Roman pontiff, and with another consecrated virgin lived in her mother's house. From her, the saint imbibed that enthusiastic love of virginity which became his distinguishing trait. His progress in secular knowledge kept equal pace with his growth in piety. It was of extreme advantage to himself and to the church that he acquired a thorough mastery of the Greek language and literature, the lack of which is so painfully apparent in the intellectual equipment of St. Augustine and in the succeeding age of the great St. Leo. In all probability, the Greek schism would not have taken place had East and West continued to converse as intimately as did St. Ambrose and St. Basil. Upon the completion of his liberal education, the saint devoted his attention to the study and practice of the law, and soon so distinguished himself by the eloquence and ability of his pleadings at the court of the Praetorian prefect Anicius Probus, that the latter took him into his council, and later obtained for him from the Emperor Valentinian the office of consular governor of Liguria and Aemilia, with residence in Milan. "Go," said the prefect, with unconscious prophecy, "conduct thyself not as a judge, but as bishop." We have no means of ascertaining how long he retained the civic government of his province. We know only that his upright and gently administration gained for him the universal love and esteem for his subjects, paving the way for that sudden revolution in his life which was soon to take place. This was the more remarkable because the province, and especially the city of Milan, was in a state of religious chaos owing to the persistent machinations of the Arian faction. St. Ambrose being the Bishop of Milan. Ever since the heroic Bishop Dionysius in the year 355 had been dragged in chains to his place of exile in the distant east, the ancient chair of St. Barnabas had been occupied by the intruded Cappadocian, Auxentius, an Arian filled with bitter hatred of the Catholic faith, ignorant of the Latin language, a wily and violent persecutor of his Orthodox subjects. To the great relief of the Catholics, the death of the petty tyrant in 374 ended a bondage which had lasted nearly 20 years. The bishops of the province, dreading the inevitable tumults of a popular election, begged the Emperor Valentinian to appoint a successor by imperial edict. He, however, decided that the election must take place in the usual way. It devolved upon Ambrose, therefore, to maintain order in the city at this perilous juncture. Proceeding to the basilica in which the disunited clergy and people were assembled, he began a conciliatory discourse in the interest of peace and moderation, but was interrupted by a voice, according to Paulinus, the voice of an infant, crying, "Ambrose, Bishop." The cry was instantly repeated by the entire assembly, and Ambrose, to his surprise and dismay, was unanimously pronounced elected. Quite apart from any supernatural intervention, he was the only logical candidate known to the Catholics as a firm believer in the Nicene Creed, and obnoxious to the Arians as one who had kept aloof from all theological controversies. The only difficulty was that of forcing the bewildered consular to accept an office for which his previous training nowise fitted him. Strange to say, like so many other believers of that age, from a misguided reverence for the sanctity of baptism, he was still only a catechumen, and by a wise provision of the canons, ineligible to be episcopate. That he was sincere in his repugnance to accepting the responsibilities of the sacred office, those only had doubted who have judged a great man by the standard of their own pettiness. Were Ambrose the worldly-minded, ambitious, and scheming individual they chose to paint him, he would have surely sought advancement in the career, and that lay wide open before him as a man of acknowledged ability and noble blood. It is difficult to believe that he resorted to the questionable expedients mentioned by his biographer as practiced by him with a view to undermining his reputation with the populace. At any rate, his efforts were unsuccessful. Valentinian, who was proud that his favorable opinion of Ambrose had been so fully ratified by the voice of clergy and people, confirmed the election and pronounced severe penalties against all who should abet him in his attempt to conceal himself. The saint finally acquiesced, received baptism at the hands of a Catholic bishop, and 8 days later, 7th December 374, the day on which East and West annually honor his memory, after the necessary preliminary degrees, was consecrated bishop. He was now in his 35th year and was destined to edify the church for the comparatively long space of 23 active years. From the very beginning, he proved himself to be that which he has ever since remained in the estimation of the Christian world, the perfect model of a Christian bishop. There is some truth underlying the exaggerated eulogy of the chastened Theodosius as reported by Theodoret, and I quote, "I know no bishop worthy of the name except Ambrose. In him the magnanimity of the Roman patrician was tempered by the meekness and charity of the Christian saint. His first act in the episcopate, imitated by many a saintly successor, was to divest himself of his worldly goods. His personal property he gave to the poor. He made over his landed possessions to the church, making provision for the support of his beloved sister. The self-devotion of his brother Soterius relieved him from the care of the temporalities and enabled him to attend exclusively to his spiritual duties. In order to supply the lack of an early theological training, he devoted himself assiduously to the study of Scripture and the Fathers, with a marked preference for Origen and Saint Basil, traces of whose influence and repeatedly met with in his works. With a genius truly Roman, he, like Cicero, Virgil, and other classical authors, contented himself with thoroughly digesting and casting into a Latin mold the best fruits of Greek thought. His studies were of an eminently practical nature. He learned that he might teach. In the exordium of his treatise, De Officiis, he complains that, owing to the suddenness of his transfer from the tribunal to the pulpit, he was compelled to learn and teach simultaneously. His piety, sound judgment, and genuine Catholic instinct preserved him from error, and his fame as an eloquent expounder of Catholic doctrine soon reached the ends of the church. His power as an orator is attested not only by the repeated eulogies, but yet more by the conversion of the skilled rhetorician Augustine. His style is that of a man who is concerned with thoughts rather than words. We cannot imagine him wasting time in turning an elegant phrase. He was one of those, says St. Augustine, who speak the truth and speak it well, judiciously, pointedly, and with beauty and power of expression. This brings us to the end of part 1 of Saint Ambrose the bishop and doctor of the church. Stay tuned and look out for the next video, which brings part 2 about our saint of today.